is a sudden moment. No matter what else happens during a performance, that moment when the lights go up will, in magical and unconscious ways, not just tell us where to look, but how to feel. Welcome to Women in Theater. I'm Linda Weiner, theater critic and arts columnist of Newsday. And our guest is Jennifer Tipton, whose subtle and brilliant lighting designs have shaped and illuminated much of the most important theater and dance of our time. Tell me, I've always wondered, do you want people to notice the lights, or do you feel that if you've done your job, they won't notice?
Well, I would like it if the critics noticed my work. But the audience in general, I think that it should pretty much remain subliminal. They're affected by it. Everybody is affected by it. But you know, in listening to your introduction, I was really struck because I think so much of a production, of a performance, an evening at the theater, is that the light comes and all of these beams of light sort of meet in the one moment and then pass on and it's gone. You know, it's very ephemeral art.
It really is. It's musical, isn't it?
Yes,
it's
totally.
One of those
totally.
You can't hold it in your hand.
I call it music for the eye,
music
actually.
For the eye. That's great.
And it has themes and variations, and and it can carry you sort of quickly from one place to another, from one feeling, one mood to another, just like music can. So it's very much music for the eye.
Now, you do a lot of dance. I mean, you've been the lighting designer for Paul Taylor's dance company for...
That's how I began. Yes.
Forever.
Yes.
And he also says that you drove the station wagon very well. More about that. And for Twyla Tharp and for Baryshnikov and
now Trisha Brown.
And now Trisha Brown. That I think I first saw your work in dance before I saw it in theater. But you do both, and you also do opera. How different is it?
Actually, in one sense, it's all the same. And I try to create the language of that particular production each time, a new language specifically for a new production each time that I do it. But obviously, it's different because in opera there's a lot of scenery. In dance, there's not so much scenery. In theater, you have previews. In theater, you work a long time on one thing, and it's usually not a repertory plot. So your sense of the timing, your sense of what the audience gives to you is very different from what it is in opera or dance.
So you get to change things during the previews?
Yes, during previews. Whereas in opera, you work for a short period of time, get the lighting done, and then there's a performance, and it's the world premiere. In dance, you have maybe an hour one day and an hour the next day, and it's the world premiere. You know, there's
and there may be 4 different pieces on the same program.
On the same program, so it's very much a repertory setup, meaning that it has to accommodate all of those pieces.
When you're beginning to work on a new project, you talk to the choreographer in a dance, and you talk to the director or to the playwright?
No, to the director. And you have put your finger on what I consider the big difference between dance, lighting for dance, and lighting for theater. The choreographer is equivalent to the playwright. And sometimes they don't really know what they've written or choreographed. Whereas the director is a mind outside of the work, sort of interpreting the work in some way. So to talk to the director is very different. That's why when I go to a dance rehearsal, I ask the choreographer not to talk to me before seeing the run-through. I look at the work, and then we can talk as much as we want. If he or she tells me, oh, I like this idea, before I've seen it, I have no idea whether I have no way to tell whether that idea is appropriate or not. I'm innocent audience if I don't talk beforehand.
Wow. But with a play, you have a script.
With a play, there is a script.
So yes. You can read it, you can imagine what you think the lighting would be, and then you go to see the director and the costume designer and the set designer and find out that they want something entirely different than what was in your head.
Yes, I was going to say. So you have to learn to read a script in a way that allows openness about your ideas. And of course, my ideas are changing until I finish the light plot. And I often say that I would love a way, you know, to do a light plot, I have to sit down with the drawings of the set. And it may take me 3 hours, 3 days to do the plot and figure out exactly where the lights should come from so that the scenery doesn't get in the way.
So a light plot then is architectural?
It's a picture. It looks like an architectural plan, yes. It is a picture of the lights, and it tells the people who are hanging the lights in the theater exactly where to put them. You know, how many feet from center.
And this takes how long?
Well, it can take as much as 3 days. I mean, I'm not doing it continuously for the entire 3 days.
And you do it in your home?
Yes, yes. Well, many people have studios that are separate from their homes.
Okay.
I have my studio in my home. So.
Chelsea?
I guess you can call it that. It's in Chelsea, yes.
Yeah. Also, house in Maine?
East Chelsea.
House in Maine.
House in Maine.
See how I weave in the personal stuff?
Yes.
Right. Why did Jerome Robbins call you a Buddha?
Well, because I don't talk very much.
Oh, it's not.
It's very interesting. I express
He
myself
was so not a Buddha. Go ahead.
Yes, right. It's true. But I express myself with lighting. And so he's one, he respected my Buddhism, I might say, my quietness. And I think that's why or maybe, you know, because many people he'd yell at, and he never yelled at me.
Yelled at me once.
Yeah, he yelled quite a bit. And I don't remember his yelling at me. So there's something about my nature. First of all, I know I scare people, which I hate. I don't want to scare people. But that also I'm very quiet, I'm reflective, and so it comes out of that center somehow. So even though my stomach may be churning like crazy, I'm still quiet and able to function.
Now, with Jerome Robbins, you did the lights for Jerome Robbins Broadway, which was your second Tony Award.
That's right.
Your first Tony Award was Andre Sherban's production of The Cherry Orchard.
The Cherry Orchard, that's right.
And I read something that you said about Sherban and darkness that just opened up a light thing for me. Do you remember about...
Well, I do remember about the discovery. The Cherry Orchard was one of the first plays that I did. Not the first, but one of the first.
It was
early
77.
On. 77, that's right. Right. And he, at one point in the second act, said, well, you know, it should get very dark here, really much darker. I had it sort of dark. He said, much, much darker, and it was almost pitch black. And the voices somehow sang out much better when it was dark like that. And I thought, you know, I come from dance. If you turn the lights out on the dance, you don't see it, and so it doesn't exist. And it also then, I feel, you know, lighting has structure. Lighting in theater has structure. In a production has structure. And since it got that dark at that moment, I had to go back through the whole play and reevaluate how dark and light it was at different places because of the structure. Now, what did I say that you remember?
It was that. It was about just darkness and how you hadn't really realized that you couldn't use darkness in the dance. But that here, he kept saying darker, darker, darker. Ooh, Andre Sherban. Right. That's good.
Then there was a dance that I did for Dan Wagner, and he decided to do it in the total darkness.
Oh, that's sadistic, isn't it? Poor dancers.
Well, no. I mean, they had body contact and so learned to do it very well in the dark. And it was quite fascinating to sit and listen to it.
Wow. And when you began, there were no computers. So you have really been a bridge person from the, I mean, it's true that electricians used to be the lighting designers?
Yes, originally, yes.
So this is a very new part of the theater.
It was Jean Rosenthal, actually, who began to get the electricians to, she was a lighting designer, one of the first, and she began to get electricians to write down the cues so they could do the same thing more than one time. And then it was on the Cherry Orchard, actually, that I had my first computer board. And I sort of, in the beginning, sort of turned up my nose at it and said, you know, it's so machine-like. And I like the warmth and you know, I began lighting in dance, and I would call the cues, and I would count the cues backwards and phrase them so that the light could move with the dancers.
Now, you would call the cues at every performance?
Because I stage managed as well as lit. With the Paul Taylor Company, I traveled with him for 7 years or so, stage managing, and therefore calling the cues. And I would always
so you
count
would
backwards.
call them, and then the electricians
in
would do it.
every language, I would call them backwards. And the electricians then would, you know, push the levers, and if I counted a little bit faster, they'd go faster, and if I slowed down, they would slow them down. So I could control how quickly or slowly the cue happened. And to give this up, you know, the computer, you just push a button. And to give this up with the computers, I was really very fearful. Believe me now, I am so thankful that you push the button and it happens at the same time, with the same timing every time.
Well, you don't have to be there.
No.
But is it less tactile, though? I mean,
Well, the computers, in some ways, I mean, there are some few things that have been given up, but another thing that's wonderful about the computer is it used to be, you see, that with these levers, you'd set the levers at a certain place and say, okay, this is Q2. And then the electrician would have to write down what moved and where. And then also maybe he had to be doing like this, you know, to get them going up, down at the same time. So it was very complicated. This way, all you have to do is say record Q6 and it's done just that quickly. So I can work in setting up the lighting. I can work in about real time, which is great.
Is your work more complicated then? I mean,
Definitely.
you can do more shadings,
Definitely.
you can do...
These long sunrise, sunset cues, one thing fading into another thing. Yes, yes, it's much more complicated, but much more real and much, much more beautiful.
The lighting is really art and science. You came from a science family.
I did.
You were going to be an astrophysicist?
I was. My father was a zoologist, and my mother was a physicist. So I spent my childhood sort of deciding first that I wanted to be a zoologist, and then that I wanted to be a physicist. By the time I went to college, Cornell, I knew well that I wanted to be the first person on the moon. Really excited about that. And so I went to Cornell majoring in physics so that I could be an astrophysicist.
Okay.
And as it turns out, I think Sally Ride was the first woman who went on a spaceship, and she's about my age, so a little bit younger. So I might have been. But I fell in love with dance at Cornell. Well, before Cornell. Actually, my mother told me that my application to Cornell sounded like that Cornell was a dance school. So, but as a matter of fact, you know, the times have changed. But the summer of my junior year in high school, I went to the American Dance Festival, which at that time was in Connecticut College. And so then the following Christmas, I took the Martha Graham Christmas course, which meant that I, at the age of 16, I guess, came to New York all alone and spent 2 weeks here at the Barbizon Hotel for Women near the Graham studio. So it was an amazing experience, and it's amazing that my parents let me do it, I think.
And you were living in Tennessee.
Knoxville, Tennessee.
Born in Ohio, but moved there.
Yes, born in Ohio. We moved to Michigan. We moved to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, and then finally
the university.
I was a university brat.
Yeah.
Yes.
And were your parents disappointed?
They were pretty excited about things. Then when grandchildren were born, they were about the way, you know, my choices.
Excited in a negative way or
No,
a positive?
no,
okay.
in a positive way.
Okay.
But as soon as there were grandchildren in the family, they sort of
had something else to do.
Had something else
That's
to
so
do.
nice,
So
yes.
they, But I've always, I sort of had blinders on, and I was going to do this. And it's so interesting to me because my nieces and nephews now most decidedly depend on their parents for support after graduating from college. But for me, once I graduate from college, I'm out of the nest. And I spent some time with very, very little money, and I can remember buying a pound of stew beef and eating a cube a day for as long as it lasted.
Did Thomas Skelton buy you shoes?
Is there a story like that?
Yes.
I don't remember it,
Yes.
but I don't remember a lot of things.
Okay,
It's probably
how
true.
about Thomas Skelton then?
Yes, yes.
Your mentor.
Yes, I met Tom. I joined the Merry-Go-Rounders.
Which
That's
sounds
a
just
company.
awful. I mean,
Oh,
what is
no,
the,
it
what
was
was
great.
the
They were a
Merry-Go-Rounders?
company. We danced for children. So every weekend we'd go out to high schools and grammar schools and in these little tiny stages perform for
Did this go
children,
on for a long time?
kids. Yes, it did, for about 10 years, I think.
I wasn't a
And,
New York girl then. So,
Yes,
yeah.
right. Then I became, after about 3 years with them, I became the rehearsal mistress, which meant that I still went on tour, but I sat in the audience so that I could critique the dancers. And in looking at the stage, I looked at the bigger picture, and of course the bigger picture was made by light. So I fell in love with light at that point, and I've been in love with it ever since. But what that meant is the next summer at Connecticut College, once again, American Dance Festival, Tom Skelton was there, and he was giving a course in lighting, which I took. I was there to assist Bonnie Bird, who was teaching dance and education, and I was there dancing with Lucas Hoving, so wearing the three hats. But the course in lighting was just, I was just gaga over it. Though I came back to New York bound and determined to be a better dancer and started taking 2 classes a day and all of that. Then Tom called me and he said, oh, no, Merry-Go-Rounders needed a stage manager. And I called Tom to ask him who he could recommend, and he said, well, I'm sure there's someone, but you have to come and clean up my papers to find the name of that person. So I went to work for Tom, sort of as his secretary assistant. And in the meantime, he began to have me help him with various companies that he was working with. And that was the beginning. I went on tour with a short tour with Paul Taylor, and I went on a very long tour to Asia with the Jose Limon Company.
Wow.
Doing Tom's lighting at the time. It was later that the circumstance for starting to light for Paul, Paul did a Broadway season, and I love it. He did 4 performances on Broadway, and we called that in those days a Broadway season.
Yes.
And someone else did the lighting. I don't know why, but it was not Tom, whatever that politics was. And afterwards, I said to Paul, I'd be perfectly happy to take this person's lighting on tour, but I'd really like to do my own. And Paul said, why don't you do your own? And so ever since, I've been doing the lighting for Paul Taylor. He opened one just the other day.
Wow. He, if you had to choose, like if someone said, okay, you can only do dance or theater or opera.
I feel so lucky because lighting designers get pigeonholed. You do only opera, you do only dance, you do only theater. And I've been able to do them all. And they feed each other artistically. I'm thrilled that I've been so lucky.
And you've always still worked, you tend to work also with really very interesting, more avant-garde theater people.
Right.
So you're not doing kitchen sink dramas.
Exactly.
You've the Wooster Group and Anne Sherbon and Peter Sellers. And so is this because aesthetically you're less interested in more mainstream theater, or?
I would certainly say that I'm not interested in Broadway productions because usually it's for that money is the bottom line in Broadway. Not that money isn't a bottom line in other things that I do, but art is sometimes the top of the bottom line, the top issue. And So it's been what challenges me, what interests me, and I think it boils down to time. It means on Broadway, because of the money, you are squeezed into doing it in such a short time that you really can't explore, that you have to make your quick choices rather than your explored choices.
You went through a period there where you were doing Broadway musicals. There was Twyla Tharp singing in the rain.
Right. Well, that was because of Twyla,
Sophisticated
of course.
Ladies.
Sophisticated Ladies and
then
Pirates of Penzance were the two, really, that I did.
And around that time, that's when sort of the British mega musicals started coming in and obliterating everything.
It was after that a bit. I decided I really decided after Sophisticated Ladies that musicals were not for me. Once again, I like to do things by design, and what I discovered in doing that in the commercial venue, musicals in particular, is that things got moved around very quickly, and so any plans that I'd had sort of got swept aside, and I was just sort of keeping up.
In the collaborative food chain, you've got the director and the set designer and the costume designer, and is the lighting designer then can you trump them?
Not really. No, not really. It's the true collaboration is the director and the set designer. Costume designers really sort of fit into the groove, are pushed into the groove, shall I say, as are lighting designers. And perhaps lighting designers are the bottom of the totem pole. Or these days, maybe the sound designer is the bottom of the totem pole. But the sound designer is moving up quickly because people hear better than they see. So sound becomes more important than light. People take light for granted for whatever reason. They shouldn't. It makes a huge difference. Huge. But
we spoke here a while ago with Willa Kim, the costume designer, who was talking about how very, very carefully she chose the materials and the colors and the hues and everything. And she said, and then the lighting desiginer comes
and destroys
it's gone.
Them all.
Right. Surely she doesn't mean you.
I hope not.
But I would think that's hard.
Well, no. I mean, first of all, a good costume designer knows that there is going to be some variation over the period of the evening in what the color of the costumes seem. But I feel very strongly and teach my students that, a costume designer who spent long hours over the dye pot, his work should show. And it's not in their interest, or it's not it's not the production's interest to cover it up in some way.
Now, you've been teaching at Yale forever?
1981.
And you're sort of famous for, no matter how busy you are, no matter where you are, because you travel so much, that somehow on Mondays you get to New Haven from Cambodia, wherever you are, for this class.
That's right.
What does it mean to you?
Oh, it's, once again, this was a bit of luck, because originally, of course, I thought I would love to teach at NYU, because I live in New York, and that would not be a commute. It would be a walk from where I live. The difference is that NYU has a number of students that they take into the program every year. At Yale, we take a maximum of 2 students into the program as lighting designers each year. That means that I have a personal relationship with them, a personal involvement in how they do. They're so extremely, each year, the 2 are so extremely different one from the other, and certainly from the others who've gone before them. And I just find it thrilling. They're like my apprentices.
And then, is there a style that you're passing on? What are you passing on besides technique?
I'm very pleased, because the students, over time, they're extremely different. Of course, I learned early on that the only thing I know to teach, that I have to teach, is the way that I do it. but I encourage them to do it their way.
So there's not like a whole little generation of little Jennifer Tiptons?
I don't feel so.
No.
And looking at their work, I don't see it that way. It's some of them do work that is far from the way that I do it.
Do you still ask them if there's ever any job that they would not take, that they would refuse to take?
Did I?
You did.
Do you know?
You did. You did. And I don't know what they answered, but your answer was really interesting to me, which is that you said that you would have to turn down a job if you thought that it was sexist.
Oh, yes, and I have done that.
Could you elaborate?
Well,
We're women in theater.
Wanna, yes, I know. And
Yeah.
this was a man's play, and I just found it very sexist, and so I found. No, I don't think I said, well, this play is sexist, so I don't want to do it. No, I don't do that. As a matter of fact, if I don't want to do something, I will find a reason not to do it rather than say, I hate the play, I hate, you know. But I just felt very strongly. I had done one play written by this person prior to this and found it deeply sexist, and read the new one and found it the same, and so said no.
Now, Jean Rosenthal, woman, so this seems to be, even though it's a technological field, seems a little bit more open to women than, for example, set design.
Well, it's because of Jean Rosenthal and Peggy Clark. Well, there were three early lighting designers, and of those three, two of them were women. Jean Rosenthal, who of course was the most successful, I would say, of the three of them, and Peggy Clark and Abe Fader. And that has sort of made a tradition of women in lighting in America.
That's fabulously interesting, isn't it? It would seem like a contradiction.
It is, because, you know, these old guys who, you know, feel they are very male chauvinists, many of the electricians that you're working with. And they, lighting designers are telling them what to do, and they seem to accept it. You just have to be strong, you know. I learned very early on, you tell them something, this is the way it's going to be. You can change your mind 10 minutes later, but tell them right now, this is it.
That's great. I wish we had a lot more time, because I have 700 more questions, including this fabulous thing about light being intensity, color, angle, and movement. And when I saw that, I thought, oh my God, it's so analytical. I love that. I'm a quantifier. But anyway, Jennifer Tipton, thank you so much. And thank you for being here. On behalf of League of Professional Theater Women, I'm Linda Weiner, and this has been Women in Theater.